Now that the antenna system has been mechanically installed, we have to mark everything so that we can identify the components of the system. With the GSM system, you may have up to 3 sectors or an omnidirectional system. If we have a 3-sector system, then you would number these sectors in alphabetical order. And what's more, we call them cells. So the labels you put on the cables would be cell A, cell B, and cell C. In an omnidirectional system, however, we would have cell O. And these are the labels that you would use on the feeder. In GSM, configurations use diversity reception. That is to say, there are 2 signal paths. There's always 2 signal branches. And those 2 signal branches will normally carry both transmit and receive signals. In other words, they are duplex. And so you will have 2 feeder cables to each sector antenna, and they'll be marked with DX1 for duplex 1. You would have duplex 2. But in the event that you require a big configuration, you may require to have a 3rd antenna jumper cable and a feeder cable. This would be labelled with TX3. This would only contain the transmit signals. If there are ancillary equipment mounted between the feeder cables and the antennas, then the installation documentation will tell you how to label these. These may be marked as transmitters TX1, TX2, or they may have receiver functions like receiver A or receiver B. Again, these labels are fitted to the jumper cables between the ancillary equipment and the antennas. In wideband CDMA, however, things are a little bit different, as a configuration involving several sectors will actually be marked as sectors, and they'll be numbered so that you would have a label sector 1 for sector 1. The next sector would be labelled sector 2, and the next would be sector 3, and these are the very labels you would use on the feeder cables. Again, in WCDMA, there are 2 signal paths for diversity. There are 2 branches, and these are labelled A and B. So after the labels on the jumpers and the feeders, you would add this, so that you would see sector 1A or sector 1B, and then sector 2A, sector 2B, and so on. Labels are to be fitted to the feeders, and they are read away from the connectors. And when you have got a junction of a feeder cable and a jumper cable, remember that there is some weatherproofing. There will be tape or some protection system over the feeder, so you do not put the labels here, you move them down the cable a little bit to allow space for weatherproofing. So let us see how we do this in practice. Okay, here we have a feeder cable and a jumper cable. In a real installation you would have several of these, but it is basically a feeder cable, jumper cable with a connector between the 2. We've not isolated ours yet, we've not waterproofed it or weatherproofed it, but that is going to extend from here down to here. So we can't fit the labels here, we have to fit the labels below it. During the installation we had a temporary marking, and I've got cell A DX1. So I shall take cell A label and I shall fit my cell A label here. Duplex 1 DX1. So I take my DX1 label and fit it after it here. So now we've marked this with cell A DX1, and it reads from the connector away. Next, I have to mark the jumper cable with the same markings. Cell A, and I shall fit my cell A label here. Duplex 1, DX1, DX1, and it's from the connector, it's reading upwards. So always from the connector away, from the connector away.